Before Sam Raimi could tackle Spider-Man, he booted up his career with a small horror film known as The Evil Dead, released in 1981. Five friends travel to a cabin in the woods where they unknowingly release flesh-possessing demons. Alright, and of course getting into the directing, Sam Raimi is a fantastic director overall, but specifically a fantastic horror director. But let's go through and take a look at the film that essentially started it all with Sam Raimi, and the film that created the iconic Raimi shot. The Evil Dead is genuinely one of the most creepy and disturbing films of this time, while remaining fun and goofy, and that alone is an incredible task. It is so extremely hard to balance the horror elements with the campy elements, but Sam Raimi just seems to be a master at doing it. Overall, there's really no directorial complaints that I have with this film, other than, the process of actually shooting it sounded like a real horror story, and I don't think I would have wanted to be on a set like that, but it also just goes to prove that when you push yourself through really tough tasks, you end up with a fantastic achievement, that being just this film overall being a cult classic. But overall, I absolutely love how wild this film is, and it's seriously grown to become one of my favorite horror films of all time. Moving on to the cast and the characters, I would say that the cast is fantastic in this film. There are some characters that are just kind of forgettable, that's just due to the dialogue, but we do get the great introduction of Ash. And obviously he's introduced into this film, but he's not nearly as groovy as he is throughout the rest of the series. But I still think seeing Ash in here and his evolution throughout the franchise is just so fun on every single rewatch. Moving on to the story, again, this film is really, really wild. The film just constantly keeps introducing new wild and interesting elements, from the destroyed bridge to Cheryl's controlled hand, all the way up to the very iconic tree assault that even Sam Raimi has said he should probably have removed. But I don't know about that. That scene, as disturbing as it is, I do think it is now one of the most iconic scenes in film history, period, let alone one of the most iconic scenes in horror. At the end of the day, I do think if that scene offends people, I get where they're coming from, but it might just not be a film for you or a film franchise for you. I get why it's shocking. I get why it's disturbing. It is disturbing. There's no taking away from that, but I still think it's kind of well done. Moving on to the visuals for The Evil Dead, I think the visuals look good, but sometimes can be fairly cheap and fuzzy. It does still, however, fit the look and style of other 80s films. Like, it looks like the 80s. There's nothing wrong with that. It just looks like a film from the past, and it is. But where this film shines are the practical effects. Obviously, if you are a huge Evil Dead fan, you might already know that the deadite eye contacts essentially almost blinded some of the actors just due to the glue and prosthetics that they had on their face. They went to extreme lengths to make this film and to make this film scary, and I think it still works to this day. Everything from the tree branches, the vines, the practical effects there, from the cinematography, I know we'll move into that, but the cinematography, the iconic Raimi shot floating across the water, like, that's fantastic. And it was just done by having Bruce Campbell push Sam Raimi in a boat across the water while he was swimming. Like, it's just creativity at its finest, and I think visually this film really shines with its, again, practical effects, from the deadites to the woods surrounding them, just to even the cabin setting. Everything does a great job at having almost a use in the film. There's nothing that's left out. And moving on to the score, I would say the score for the entire Evil Dead franchise is overall well done, but the score for the entire Evil Dead franchise is the one thing that hasn't really stuck with me. As for Scream, as for Halloween, you've got these iconic horror soundtracks. Of course, you've got Friday the 13th. Every horror fan can essentially mimic those soundtracks, whereas I don't feel like I can mimic any bit of sound that was featured in The Evil Dead 2, Army of Darkness, or the series. Like, there's nothing that I really resonate with the score. That's not a bad thing. I think it all works very effectively, but it's nothing that I find memorable. Moving on to the final thoughts and spoilers for The Evil Dead, released in 1981, which to this point in time has remained one of my favorite horror films of all time. In this film, we get some awesome camera work and, of course, the introduction of Ash, who has now become one of probably the greatest final boy in horror. This film is fun, it's entertaining, and for the time, I think it is extremely well paced, and it is a fun watch today. I really love this film, but now I can't wait to start talking about Evil Dead Rise. I can't wait to see how unique and how brutal that film will end up being. And don't forget, I will be reviewing Evil Dead 2, Army of Darkness, the Evil Dead 2013 remake, as well as every individual season of Ash vs. the Evil Dead, leading up to the release of Evil Dead Rise. I said Evil Dead a lot in this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm Carter Scotland Allen, and I will see you guys later. Peace.